Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to go over something that really caught my attention. Data straight out of JP Morgan Chase's Guide to Retirement. What stood out to me was their personalized savings checkpoints. For households making $90,000 a year or less, their savings and investing target was just 5%. For households making $100,000 or more a year, their savings target was just 10%. At first glance, those numbers might seem surprisingly low, especially if we compare it to the numbers we often hear, like save 15, 20, or even 25% of your income. But when you dig into JP Morgan's assumptions and their math, well, it starts to make sense, and it does reveal something surprising about a typical retirement in America. So first you might be wondering, why are they recommending a 5% savings rate or a 10% savings rate? How do they make that split? If your household income is $90,000 a year or less, Social Security is a lot more likely to do more of the heavy lifting when it comes to your income needs in retirement. Odds are Social Security will replace, say, 70 or 80% of your income once you reach retirement. That makes it possible to meet your retirement income needs with a much lower savings percentage. And truly at lower income levels, it can be hard to save a larger share of your income simply because a greater share of your income is going to your day-to-day essentials. So setting your target at, say, 5% can be more realistic. And that's not to say you shouldn't aim to increase your savings target over time, but sometimes setting a target too high makes it feel like it's not possible to reach. But once you move up that income scale, once you're making $100,000 a year, $150,000 a year, or $250,000 or $300,000 a year, all of a sudden the picture changes. At that point, once you get to retirement, Social Security only might replace, say, 20% of your income. So that means you can't rely on Social Security alone to do the heavy lifting in retirement, and that's why JP Morgan suggests that higher earners save a higher percentage of their income, that 10% benchmark, because once they reach retirement, they're really going to have to rely on their investments to do the heavy lifting to fund their lifestyle. And honestly, that's the way it should be. Social Security is designed as a social safety net. It was never really designed to be a standalone retirement plan. So if you earn more, you should be able to save more to help fund your retirement. And that's why JP Morgan frames their checkpoints this way. Social Security replaces a larger share of income at the lower end and a much smaller share at the higher end, which means lower earners can lean much more heavily into the system in their retirement years, and higher earners have to fund more of their retirement from their personal investments. Now let's look at the actual checkpoints from JP Morgan. These are the savings targets they suggest based on age and household income. And that's really the thing to focus on here, household income. So whether you have a single income earning household or a dual income earning household, this is the target the entire household aims for. It's not that you have to hit double that amount if you have two income earners. You just look at the household income. So the first table we're going to look at is for households with an income of $90,000 a year or less. And remember, the savings target here is 5% of income. Look at that. By age 65, a household earning $60,000 a year is expected to have about $445,000 saved. A $90,000 household, they're expected to have around $700,000 invested. And remember that important detail. These are household numbers. If you're in a dual income household, each person doesn't have to hit these checkpoints on their own. Some of the biggest costs, like housing, insurance, and utilities, are fixed. And if you're in a dual income earning household, these costs tend to get spread across two incomes, which can make them more manageable. And that can mean it's easier to hit the necessary savings targets for your goals. But if you're in a single income earning household, you likely have to shoulder these costs all by yourself, and that can make it harder to hit certain savings targets. Either way, these checkpoints are designed to reflect what the household would need as a whole, not what the individual members within the household would need to hit. None of these targets suggest that you need $1 million saved to make retirement work. Not one. That is such a stark contrast to the mainstream narrative that we tend to hear, where it seems like every headline says you need $1 million saved up or else you're completely doomed in retirement. And I feel like tables like this bring a dose of reality to what the true American is facing. Now let's move up the income ladder to households making $100,000 a year or more. Now remember, JP Morgan suggests that these households have a savings target of 10% of their income. Here we see these numbers climb faster. By 65, a $150,000 household is expected to have $1.28 million saved. With a $200,000 income, that checkpoint is about $1.64 million. But again, remember these are household targets. Two earners together don't each need to hit $1 million individually. And I feel like that's a really important distinction to highlight because, again, so often with this narrative of $1 million being pushed, some people feel like each individual worker within the household needs to have $1 million saved up by the time they step away from the workforce. Whether or not that is your case, it depends on your expenses and your income. But JP Morgan does highlight here that we want to focus on household expenses because that's truly what matters.